about 4 in 10 Americans say it is more common to express racist views about people who are Asian than before the coronavirus outbreak. This is much more towards Asians than those who are Hispanic, whites, and Black. And Black also is very high as well. There's been an increase, but Asian Americans in particular has had the highest increase since the coronavirus outbreak. Next slide. And when we actually break the data looking at people by a racial group, a racial ethnic group, we find that Asians in particular are reporting that the highest in terms of 39% of the Asian sample say that people have been have acted more uncomfortable around them since the coronavirus outbreak. Also, there's been an increase of been subject to racial slurs or jokes. This is 31% for Asians compared to other groups, much higher than everyone else. And also, Asian Americans have also feared someone might threaten or physically attack them. And this is much more, 26% of Asian Americans have reported that there's been an increase compared to other racial ethnic groups. Next slide. And now partisan. We know John Yang talked about this earlier. There is a big partisan debate even about mask wearing. As we already know what happened the past week with mask wearing, we know that masks, especially partisans, been a big split. But here's some about racial breaks. Looking at, well, from partisan standpoint, we know that more Democrats than Republicans say they wore masks in stores all or most of the time. And when you look at groups, Asian Americans in particular have the most in terms of are wearing a mask or face covering in stores, and as well as Hispanics and Blacks, much more than those who are white. Next slide. And also, when we look at because there's a lot of mask wearing, those who are Black and Asian adults are also more likely than white and Hispanic adults to worry about people being suspicious if they're wearing a mask. So you see that Asians and Black Americans are more likely to worry that others will be suspicious of them. And we already know from the previous slide that Asian Americans and Black Americans are more likely to wear more masks than other racial groups. So this is an interesting data point. Next slide. And this is a question we really, people have anecdotal, people think that, are wondering, is President Trump making race relations worse, or is there progress towards improving? We see that the general public, roughly half of Americans have said Trump has made race relations worse, but this is broken by race. You could see that Asian, Blacks, and Hispanics, majority have said that President Trump has made it worse. And then you see a big, wide partisan split, where 80% of Democrats or leaning Democrats believe that President Trump has made it worse, whereas Republicans and leaning Republicans have only about 40%. And 32% of Republicans actually say that Trump has tried but failed to make progress on race relations. Next slide. And now when we're looking at the Black Lives Matter movement, we asked this question right in the midst of when the episode and protest around George Floyd was happening in early June. So as we know from earlier episodes when we had this back in the 90s, when everyone was worried that would there be some anti-Asian hate even within among Black American community, we see here that actually there's quite support even among Asian Americans towards the Black Lives Matter movement. You see that most Americans express support for Black Lives Matter, and you can see that Asians, about 75%, strongly support or somewhat support the Black Lives Matter movement. The focus here is showing that there has been increase of discrimination towards Asian Americans and Black Americans since the coronavirus.